And Titus Zam is the senator representing Benue Northwest. He's also the senator. He's also the chairman committee on the Senate committee on rules and business. He joins me in the studio to discuss, what the Senate has been up to in the last 1 year. Good to have you join us, Senator.
Thank you.
So, how would you describe the last 1 year of the Senate? Especially with the leadership tussle and contest we saw just before the inauguration of the Senate?
Well, I want to say that God has been very kind to the 10th Senate to the extent that we have spent 12 months without losing any of our members. That is historic, and we'll continue to thank the Almighty God for that. You made reference to tussle that characterized the election of the leadership of the Senate. To me, that was democracy at its best. Normally, when people come into Senate, they come with different aspirations and interests. Some come for just sit and do their job as senators, others aspire for leadership of the Senate. And so, during our takeoff, 2 or 3 persons indicated their interest to lead the Senate as Senate presidents. But at the end of the day, 2 major contenders emerged, namely Senator Goswe Akpabio and Senator Yari. But the Senate chose Senator Goswe Akpabio based on their own definite considerations of certain parameters that have to do with the leadership of this country and the capacity of the contenders to the Senate leadership position. For example, the history of Nigerian Senate shows that when the president of this country moves to a particular region of this country, certain leadership positions in the Senate also reflect that movement. When His Excellency Alhaji Muhammad Buhari was the president of this country, for example, from the northern part of this country, the Senate president was from the north. So it made a lot of sense for us, the 10th Senate, to also move the Senate presidency to the southern part of Nigeria, now that Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu is the president of this country from the southern part of this country. So the ultimate objective of the Senate to elect Senator Goswe Akpabio was in tandem with this precedence of Senate presidency moving alongside with the president of this country. And so it was very easy for us to settle for Goswe Akpabio, among other considerations that have to do with capacity, that have to do with comportment, that have to do with ability to mobilize his colleagues and provide credible leadership. So the debate, or what you saw, which does appear to be some kind of friction from the beginning, was just part of democracy. When you contest.
But has that been resolved? Because the understanding we have is that still exists, that division still exists, and that in fact that has led to some move in some quarters to oust the current Senate president, that everything is being done, and that's the reason for some of the uproar we see in the Senate sometimes.
No, I don't see that. I've been there. I'm the chairman of one of the committees in the Senate, so I'm very close to the leadership of the Senate. If there is any friction, I should be able to know. We don't have any friction arising from that contest that took place several years ago. Normally, when you have you have about 109 people, elected representatives of the people in one place. There are bound to be bubbles here and there, but they have nothing to do with the scramble for leadership again. Senators have settled for Goswe Akpabio, and he's really knows well. There is no hangover from the initial contest for leadership of the Senate presidency, as far as I know, unless you can refer to any specific incidents. For now, I can't point at any. We are moving as one family.
So let's speak to your duties, to Nigerians. You've talked about the running of the Senate.
Yeah.
So there is just a sense among Nigerians about how just generally the National Assembly, but especially the Senate, which many see as a senior legislative chamber, that there seems to be this, quote, aloofness to the plight of Nigerians, that you're there, majorly just for what, to serve your own interest. You do not follow up on the policies of the executive to at least check them when it doesn't sit well with Nigerians.
But that is a gross misconception and misunderstanding of the workings of the Senate, especially the 10th Senate. If there is any Senate that has shown interest in the welfare of all and sundry, it is this 10th Senate. You are aware that a few weeks ago, the Senate rose in opposition against the increase in the electricity tariff, that the citizens complained that the increase is too high. The Senate refused to approve the request. Indeed, on the day the report of the Committee for Power led by Senator Akpabio was to be presented, if not for the subsisting court order, by now we would have been able to bring down that over 200% increase in the tariff. That is a pointer to the fact that the Senate is conscious of the welfare of the citizens of this country. You're also aware that this same Senate refused to approve the president's approval to go to to challenge the military, the new military regime in Niger Republic, which some people felt would amount to creating tension between Nigeria and the Republic of Niger. This Senate stood its ground and refused the request from the president to send troops. So we are very conscious of the fact that we are there for and on behalf of the common man and the citizens of this country. So if anybody accuses us of being aloof, then I think that person is not being fair to us. So much, has happened to point to the fact that we are conscious of the interests of the people that elected us into the 10th Senate. So I don't think that position is correct.
And what about your oversight functions as regards to the ministries, departments, and agencies? You're aware that in terms of performance review, for the last 1 year, some people believe that some ministers do not have anything to show or so much to show for the last 1 year, and that this is supposed to be, there's supposed to be a process, especially in the Senate, you screen them, that is supposed to be a process in the Senate where you are able to, you should have some performance review, and that you don't do that. So perhaps why some of these ministers do not have anything to show for the last 1 year.
Well, it is not the duty of the Senate to use whip and beat ministers to perform. Ministers have their own priorities. They have their own scale of duty determined for them by the appointing authority. For us, is to monitor, you understand, based on their own standard of performance. So what we do, as I talk to you, even today, I just came back from an oversight visit at the Ministry of Trade and Investment. So every senator is going about carrying out their oversight duties as required by the law. But the standard of performance of the executive arm of government does not rest with the senators. We can only assess what they have set out to do based on the budget that we have approved. So we are doing that. Nobody can accuse us of being not interested in the performances of the minister. On the other hand, it's the ministers themselves that are even saying we are overbearing, because we invite them, we go to their ministries to supervise what they are doing. And so that's not correct view.
All right, so let me put you on hold. We'll talk more on that after this break. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll continue. Thanks for staying with us on this special edition of the News at 1 as we continue to assess the 10th National Assembly in its first anniversary. We're still speaking with Title Zam. He's the Chairman, Senate Committee on Rules and Business. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to the issue of the insecurity in the country. There's several conversations coming out from the National Assembly, but it looks like it's all motion, but not necessarily movement. That's how Nigerians see it. What is the Senate doing, the 10th Senate doing, to ensure that the issue of insecurity is curbed in the country?
Well, my dear sister, I want to thank you for bringing this conversation here. The Senate, and indeed the National Assembly, that is the two chambers of the House of Representatives and that of the Senate, have collectively demonstrated a lot of concern over the state of insecurity in this country. You will recall that a few months after the Senate was inaugurated and the service chiefs were appointed and their names forwarded to the National Assembly for clearance, shortly after that, we invited the service chiefs to come before the Senate and give us their own roadmap as to how to deal with this security problem that the country is facing. They came and told us they needed resources here and there. And we said, okay, if money is what you need to do your job, we will do that. And then the Senate, in liaison with the executive, brought on board a supplementary budget. And so much money was given to the military and other security agencies to enable them carry out their functions. And for some time, we saw a kind of a reduction in the wave of insecurity in the country. But then, suddenly, we saw a relapse into the same situation before this interaction. And so, the Senate is not resting, and we are talking. We are also assessing the situation. As I speak to you, a few months ago, I think the Chief of Army Staff precisely was invited to come again to address the Senate over these continued security challenges that the country is going through. He came forward and told us what efforts they are making. But as I speak, Nigeria is still bleeding. And this insecurity have to do with farmers' headers crisis, kidnapping, robbery. And
I want to stay, because you mentioned farmers' headers crisis, I want to stay on that because we're now seeing a bill, the Senate, to establish a commission that will regulate ranching, and that's creating some sort of,
And I'm the sponsor of the bill.
You are, and that's why I want to ask you, what was the thinking, because, you see how it's creating controversy, people are for and against it. What was the thinking behind that bill?
Principally, I come from a state, I come from Benue State, and my senatorial district has become the epicenter of farmers' headers crisis, leading to loss of lives and properties, amounting to several millions, if not billions. So I feel concerned as someone who is elected by my people to represent them in Abuja here, where all the security agencies are headquartered. I felt concerned that we need to do something. Over the years, there has been this movement back and forth about coming on board with a law that will regulate the relationship between farmers and herders. But none of these efforts have ever seen any concrete result. So my motivation is to bring on board a law that will regulate the relationship between herders and farmers in order to stem this tide of continued attacks and counterattacks between farmers and herders. So, in summary, my objective is to find peace between herders and farmers through a law that will regulate that relationship, determine the boundaries of each of these groups, be they farmers or herders. So my motivation generally is to bring peace.
All right, so we'll see whether this, it's now going to get to the stage of public reading. I think that's the
public hearing.
Hearing, rather. That's the next phase. We'll see how Nigerians react to it and whether
I expect that Nigerians will come out en masse to support that bill so that it will come into.
We are watching out for that. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us on the 10th Senate titles. The Senator representing Benue Northwest and Chairman Senate Committee Rules and